Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be doing two chapters. It may be two videos. This one's going to be chapter 5. The second one will be chapter 6. You will only have one set of questions. So be like, where's the ones for chapter 6? You're only going to have one set. So when we left off with our last chapter, we learned that Franklin Roosevelt is on the dime because he started the March of Dimes, and he also had polio, which made it to where you could no longer walk. And that's what he's struggling with now, and the chapter 5 is struggling to walk. Franklin was determined to run for office again one day, but he wanted to walk first. It was important for the Democratic Party to remember him, so he kept in touch through letters and phone calls. Eleanor was determined to keep Franklin's name alive. I don't want him forgotten, she said. I want him to have a voice. Louise Howe convinced her to attend political meetings. He coached her on how to speak in public. She began to enjoy the political life of her own. Women causes were important to her. Although Franklin worked as hard as he could, he still couldn't walk. But he came up with a way of standing and moving forward, swinging one leg and then the other. He would hold tightly to the arm of a person on one side and use a crutch on the other. Eventually, he could lean on a cane instead of a crutch. It wasn't walking, but he made it look like it was walking. In 1924, the Democratic Party asked Franklin to nominate Al Smith, the governor of New York, to run for president. The convention was held in Madison Square Garden in New York City. Franklin wanted to appear strong and confident. He got to the podium with the help of a crutch and his son, James. It was a great struggle, but Franklin made it with sweat pouring down his face. He gripped the podium and stood straight and tall. His face lit up with a big smile, and the crowd went wild. By now, he must have known that he would never walk again, but a life in politics was certainly possible. And when the time came to campaign, he would face the American people standing tall. 4 years later, in 1928, Roosevelt was elected governor of New York. He won by only 24,000 votes out of the more than 4 million cast. He won. Republicans were in charge of the state government. At his opening address, Franklin was charming and careful. He spoke of new laws to protect workers and unions, but the Republicans were not interested on hearing about these issues. Then on October 1929, the unexpected happened. The stock market on Wall Street crashed and the country turned upside down. People lost their money, then they lost their jobs. This was the beginning of the Great Depression. In 1932, at least 12 million men and women were out of work. They lined up at soup kitchens for free food. Many lost their homes and now nowhere to live. With only the clothes on their backs, they gathered in squatter camps, sometimes called Hooversville after the president, Herbert Hoover. Franklin was convinced that now was the time to run for president. He campaigned across the country on the Roosevelt Special. At every stop, this tall, attractive, confident man stood and promised to get people back to work. He offered them a future. Americans listened and saw a leader they could count on. Franklin beat his opponent, Herbert Hoover, by a landslide. Out of 48 states, he lost only 6. The Roosevelt era had begun. All right, we're going to go ahead and start chapter 6, Becoming President. Franklin's campaign song had been Happy Days Are Here Again after he was sworn in as the 32nd President of the United States. So we're at the 32nd President. Franklin spoke to the nation. He promised them action and action now. He was going to start new programs to help them. He said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. People are certainly afraid. They no longer trusted banks to keep their money safe, so they lined up to take out their savings. Without money, banks were collapsing all over the country. Immediately, Franklin declared a 4-day bank holiday. No one could take money because banks were closed. Franklin hoped this time out would calm people down. The holiday worked, but Franklin had no way of knowing that beforehand. All his life, Franklin was willing to experiment. If he tried something and it didn't work, he would try something else. He wanted to hear ideas and opinion from lots of people. Above all, try something. Franklin gave his first fireside chat on the radio. He wanted everyone to understand what he was doing to fix the banks. It is safer for you to keep your money in a reopened bank than to keep it under your mattress, he told them. The White House received thousands of letters and telegrams. The fireside chat was a huge success. The president had spoken to people as a friend. They felt he cared about their problems. In the first 100 days, Congress passed 15 major laws to help people get back to work. The programs Franklin had promised were getting underway. They became known across the country as the New Deal. He started many new agencies to get working on solutions. The CCC sent young, out of work men to national parks and forests to plant trees, build fire stations, and put out fires. The AAA helped farmers unable to sell their crops to pay for their rent or mortgages. The WPA built roads, hospitals, schools, and other public buildings. Artists, writers, and musicians were asked to paint murals in public buildings, write books, and perform in concert around the country. The NRA drew up rules to help businesses and workers get along. Rules for prices, wages, and hours of work were set, and workers could join unions or to bargain with companies. The TVA brought electricity and other improvements to rural areas in 7 southern states. Franklin hadn't forgotten all those people in Georgia living without electricity. More programs were added later. An important one that still exists today is the SSA, created in 1935. The government mailed checks to retired people over 65, the disabled, the unemployed, and the needy children. The government got the money from workers' payroll taxes and company taxes. These new programs cost the government a lot of money. Some people said too much money, and they didn't like the government running things that they thought should be done by private companies. They didn't like paying higher taxes either. But these were unusual times. Franklin was sure he was sure to be doing things right, and the voters thought so too. In 1936, Franklin ran again. He won in an even bigger landslide. This time he only lost 2 states, Maine and Vermont. Although voters in Congress approved of the New Deal, Franklin faced a big stumbling block with the Supreme Court. If a law passed by Congress goes against the Constitution, it is the Supreme Court's job to strike it down. It did just that with some of the alphabet programs, especially the AAA or the AAA and the NRA. The court said the government did not have the right to start them or pay for them. Franklin was furious. He had not appointed any of these judges to the court. They were all conservative judges who believed in as little government as possible. Franklin wanted liberal judges who believed that it was the government's job to be involved. Besides, 7 out of the 9 judges were over 70 years old and appointed for life. He claimed they weren't getting enough work done fast enough. Franklin decided to pack the court by appointing an additional judge for every judge over 70. To Franklin's surprise, Congress didn't like this idea at all, and neither did the people. Thousands of letters of protest came in. It was not often that Franklin lost a battle, but this time he did. Over time, he did get to choose 7 judges, but his power had been checked. All right, I hope y'all enjoyed those chapters. I know it was a lot, but I only have another minute and before my video doesn't work. So look for your questions, and I hope everyone's having fun and staying safe. Hope to see you soon.